Hey guys, tonight we're stepping straight into the soot-stained, perfume-soaked, slightly sour world of Victorian hygiene. You're walking cobbled streets that glisten with coal dust, past gas lights flickering through thick yellow London. Fog. The air smells like damp wool, rotting cabbage, horse sweat, and just a whisper of lavender sachet clinging on for dear life. But it's not the best night to be wearing your one good pair of shoes. The gutter beside you gurgles ominously. You step over something mushy, hopefully not a dead rat. Could be last night's dinner dumped from a window above. You can't tell. But one thing's clear. You are not surviving this week without catching something unpleasant. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the heart of Victorian London. The year? Let's say 1852. The smell? Unmistakable. A damp bouquet of human sweat, chimney smoke, manure, and fish with a top note of coal tar. Cleanliness, as you know it, simply doesn't exist here, not for most people. And while the wealthy might have ceramic wash basins and lavender soaps, the average Londoner lives with dirt under their nails and soot in their lungs. Let's start with the most basic fact. Indoor plumbing still rare. Unless you're extremely wealthy or residing in the newer parts of town, you're not pulling any levers or flushing any handles. Most houses have chamber pots, lovely ceramic bowls for all your bodily needs, stashed discreetly under the bed. At night, if nature calls, you stumble to the pot, try not to trip on your skirt or the dog, and do your business in the dark in the morning. That pot's full, and someone perhaps you takes it out to be dumped in the backyard privy, or if you're lazy or spiteful, straight out the window. This, by the way, is why it's not wise to walk close to buildings. People upstairs shout, "Garde-lou," a corruption of the French garde à l'eau before, launching the contents skyward and downward. You dodge, sometimes not. The smell of London in the mid-19th century isn't an accident. It's a culmination. The city's sewers are overflowing or in many neighborhoods simply non-existent. The Thames, meant to be a river, has become a vast open sewer. And it's not just your household filth joining the mix. Tanneries dump animal guts, slaughterhouses send blood downstream, and anyone with something to discard? The river's right there. Victorians live surrounded by dirt, literal and figurative. Coal soot from the thousands of chimneys clings to everything. Your windowsill, black, your curtains, dingy, your lungs? Well, you try not to think about it. Historians still argue whether the infamous London fog was more smoke than mist, but we know one thing for sure. It was thick, yellow, and toxic enough to kill. And yet, people adapt. You've learned to tell the quality of a neighborhood by its smell. Wealthy areas may stink of horse dung and perfume. Poorer ones add rotting fish and human waste to the bouquet. And in working-class tenements where dozens may share a single privy, the scent is something you carry with you on your clothes, your skin, your hair, baths. Oh, we'll get there. But for now, let's appreciate the soundtrack of Victorian life. You hear hoofbeats clattering on cobblestones, chimney sweep boys whistling, and the occasional splash from a boot sinking into something unidentifiable. Someone nearby hawks a thick cough into the gutter. You try not to breathe too deeply. In your pockets, you keep a handkerchief scented with rose water or vinegar. Not because you're delicate, but because you need it. You press it to your nose when a wagon loaded with night soil passes, or when you turn down a lane where the privy has clearly overflowed. Again, this was normal. This was daily life. You accepted it because you had no choice. Your home depends on your class. If you're a member of the lower middle class, you may be renting a few rooms in a boarding house. If you're poor, it's a shared flat in a slum, walls thin as paper, mice in the cupboard, and water fetched by the bucket from a pump 2 streets away. Water, by the way, that might be full of bacteria, though nobody knows it yet. Germ theory isn't quite a thing. Not officially. Not yet. You use that water for everything. Drinking, cleaning, cooking, and washing. It's often cloudy. Tastes faintly of iron. You shrug and sip. Sanitation laws are aspirational. In 1848, Britain passed the Public Health Act. Revolutionary, yes, but mostly ignored unless enforced. Which it isn't much. The poor live in damp, airless cellars. The rich, they complain about the smell and install more curtains. One curious tidbit: some households use ashes. Yes, literal ashes from the fireplace to clean floors and surfaces. Sprinkle them, scrub a bit, then sweep. It helps with the smell. Allegedly. Probably doesn't. Still, not everything is bleak. There's a strange charm to how resilient people are. Women hang sheets between tenement windows, shouting gossip across alleyways. Boys play stickball in the street, occasionally falling face first into horse manure. You avoid puddles. Most of the time there's humor here too. Victorians, ever inventive, market powders that claim to purify air. Charcoal blocks, lavender sprays, even ozone papers meant to neutralize stink. Spoiler, they don't. You hear a bell ring. The rag and bone man is making his rounds, collecting scraps for resale. You wrinkle your nose. The day is beginning. Another day in the dirtiest, smelliest, most fascinating city in the world. Welcome to Victorian Hygiene. You're in for a ride. You wake to the faint clatter of hooves and the whistle of a muffin man several streets over. It's early, and your bed is stiff, itchy, and probably hosting a few unwanted 6-legged roommates. The coarse wool blanket smells faintly of damp and sweat, and the air is cold enough that your breath fogs. Time to start your day. But unlike your modern routine sink, soap, toothbrush, maybe a warm shower here in Victorian London, your morning hygiene is more of a suggestion than a sequence. You shuffle to the washstand in the corner of the room. It's a narrow wooden table, stained and wobbling slightly, topped with a chipped porcelain bowl and a matching pitcher. The water inside is icy because it was drawn the night before and left sitting in the cold room all night. It smells faintly metallic. You dip your fingers in and flinch. Washing your face suddenly seems optional. Still, you splash water on your cheeks, rub your eyes, and pat your face with a towel that hasn't been laundered in, well, a while. The towel's more decorative than absorbent, and it smells a little like the bed. You try not to breathe too deeply. There's a single cone resting beside the basin. It's made of bone and looks antique, possibly because it is. You use it with care, tugging gently through knots in your sleep-mussed hair, hoping not to find any lice. But you know they're around. Everyone does. It's just part of life. Children are especially prone, and schools sometimes perform inspections. Though what they do after finding them is anyone's guess. For scent, you reach for a small vial of vinegar, sometimes called toilet vinegar, meant to mask the funk of daily life. It's a mixture of diluted acetic acid with a touch of rosemary or lemon peel. You dab a bit behind your ears and hope the person next to you on the omnibus can't smell your armpits. Or worse, your feet. Deodorant doesn't exist. You've got pits, and they've got opinions. A bar of soap might sit by the basin. It's brownish, smells like a mix of tallow and lye, and has the texture of a stale biscuit. It was once white, maybe. Possibly rose-scented if you squint your imagination. But it's been used by everyone, in the household shared between boarders, siblings, and guests. If you're lucky, you might have your own sliver. If you're unlucky, the sliver's been dropped behind the cabinet and now plays host to dust and spiderwebs. Historians still argue whether most working-class Victorians washed their entire bodies regularly or simply focused on the visible and offensive parts face, hands, feet, and occasionally the underarms. The full-body bath was rare, unnecessary even according to some 19th century health guides. Too much bathing was feared to weaken the constitution, open pores to miasma, or worse provoke sinful thoughts. Cleanliness might be next to godliness, but only if done modestly and with minimal nudity. So your morning bath is more like a brief negotiation. A splash here, a dab there. Maybe you wipe behind your ears if you're feeling virtuous, but you probably don't take off more than your outer garments. The room's too cold anyway. If you live in a boarding house or tenement, there's likely a queue for the basin. You might get 5 minutes before someone knocks on the door with increasing urgency. And sharing that bowl of now cloudy water with 3 other people before breakfast, that's just your reality. Hair washing is even rarer. Once a week if you're ambitious. Once a month if you're average. You might sprinkle your scalp with flour, cornstarch, or orris root to absorb oil, then comb it out. A Victorian dry shampoo, if you will. If you've got money, you might own a pomade or hair tonic, some concoction of bear grease, perfume, and a dash of snake oil. Literally, you dress quickly, stiff fingers fumbling with buttons and laces. Undergarments first, chemise and drawers for women, long linen shirts for men, followed by petticoats, corsets, waistcoats, and outer layers, none of which are washed often. Laundry is expensive, laborious, and risky boiling water, scrubbing boards, harsh soap that chews through fabric dot. So instead of washing your clothes frequently, you simply change your underthings and air out your garments. Maybe spritz them with vinegar, hang them near an open window, or beat the dust from them with a stick. You might even store a sachet of dried herbs in your bodice to maintain a facade of freshness in wealthier households. Servants would carry heated water to your room and remove your used basin. But in your modest circumstances, you do it yourself. You might lug the bowl downstairs to dump it in the communal drain, or if you're particularly harried out the back window into the alley. And here's the fun part. That water, It joins hundreds of others on its way to the street, trickling down into London's crumbling drainage system. A murky network of old Roman sewers, cracked clay pipes, and open ditches disguised as canals. The morning chorus of chamber pot, emptying, hand-washing, and laundry runoff is the lifeblood of Victorian urban infrastructure. You're part of something bigger, something grimier, and if you're employed, you're expected to be presentable, at least in theory. Offices want clean collars, even if the rest of you smells like a coal bin. Factory owners don't care what you smell like as long as you show up. And domestic service? That's a world unto itself, with strict dress codes, rigid grooming standards, and daily inspections from employers with very sensitive noses. But again, appearances are everything. You brush your shoes with a horsehair. Rub your hands with lemon peel, if you can find it, and adjust your cravat or bonnet. You look in the mirror. You don't look clean, but you look like you tried. And that, in Victorian society, is almost more important than the truth. Quirky tidbit of the day? Some Victorian women believed a cold sponge to the spine each morning would promote good posture and spiritual purity. You consider it for a moment, then laugh. Not today. Maybe tomorrow. Outside, the street beckons. The bakery's chimney is already puffing. The fishmonger yells unintelligibly. A neighbor is emptying her night bucket with a casual flick of the wrist. And you're ready. Washed kind of, dressed barely, perfumed vaguely. Welcome to your Victorian morning routine. Let's just hope no one gets close enough to smell the truth. You're standing by the washstand, still blinking sleep from your eyes, when you realize something's missing from this quaint little morning tableau. Your toothbrush. That modern staple, the soft, bristled, ergonomically designed tool you probably take for granted is nowhere to be found. But don't worry. In your Victorian life, oral hygiene has its own unique charm. You reach into the small drawer under the wash basin and pull out what passes for a toothbrush. A rough wooden handle stained from years of use with stiff, uneven bristles that were once hog hair but now resemble a broom that's been through a windstorm. If you're lucky, this one is your own. If not, well, you hope the previous user didn't have consumption. Shared toothbrushes weren't unheard of, especially in larger households or among poorer families. The idea of personal oral care items hadn't quite caught on. Germ theory's still on the fringe, and most people don't connect tooth decay with bacteria. They blame bad blood, weak constitution, or simply bad luck. And sugar? That's seen more as a delight than a dental hazard. You dip the brush in water. No toothpaste here. Instead, you reach for a little tin of tooth powder. It's a chalky mixture that might include ground cuttlefish bone, crushed charcoal, baking soda, and sometimes even brick dust. Yes, brick dust. Because nothing says, I care about my enamel, like scrubbing it with powdered masonry. The taste? Dry, bitter, faintly salty, with a mineral tang that makes you question your life. Choices. You dab a bit onto the bristles and begin. Up and down, back and forth. It feels more like sandpaper than dental care, and it squeaks against your teeth, a high-pitched scrape that makes your molars shudder. You pause for a moment, eyeing your reflection in the tarnished mirror. Your gums are red, bleeding slightly. Normal, really. Victorian dental health is not for the faint of heart. Many adults already sport a few gaps in their smile battle scars from sugar, soot, and questionable dentistry. Oh, and about that sugar? By mid-century, it's become increasingly affordable, especially with imports from the colonies. That means sweetened tea, sugary biscuits, and candy for children. But the consequences, decay, abscesses, and tooth loss, come soon after. By age 30, a full set of teeth is practically a luxury. Now, if you're middle class or wealthier, you might own a silver-handled brush. Perhaps it's imported from France. Some even use sponges or claws to rub their teeth clean, less abrasive, more genteel. But for the average Victorian, it's all about function over comfort. Just get the grime off and hope your breath doesn't knock out your employer. Historians still argue whether people brushed daily or only on special occasions. Some suggest Sunday was the traditional day for a full wash and brush, part hygiene, part moral ritual. Others believe that many didn't bother at all unless pain demanded it. You're in the middle camp, not devout but trying, mostly for social reasons, because in Victorian society, your mouth says more about you than you might expect. A clean smile implies self-discipline. A rotting one, moral failure. Decay isn't just unpleasant, it's a mark of character, or so the era believes. You rinse your mouth with a gulp of water and swish it around. No fluoride here. No minty freshness. Just a chalky aftertaste and the vague feeling that your molars have been through a quarrying operation. If you're particularly fashionable, you might chew on a licorice root stick afterward. Not only does it help clean your teeth, it's also believed to freshen the breath. Plus, it gives you something to gnaw on while pretending you aren't starving. Breakfast won't come for another hour. You set the brush down carefully, bristles up, though it hardly matters. It's going to dry into its usual fan of prickly discomfort either way. You tuck the tooth powder back into the drawer and glance at the soap again. You consider a second splash of water, but the room's so cold your fingers still sting from the first. Quirky tidbit. Victorian advice columns sometimes recommended rubbing your teeth with burnt bread crusts or even mustard powder to prevent yellowing. Others swore by salt and ashes. You're pretty sure these methods are 90% wishful thinking and 10% masochism. Of course. If things go wrong, and they often do, you might find yourself in need of a dentist. Brace yourself. The local barber might do the trick. Many barbers double as tooth pullers. No anesthesia, just a strong arm, a pair of pliers, and a bucket nearby for, well, you can imagine. If you're lucky and have some savings, you might visit a dental surgeon. But even then, expect crude tools, no antiseptics, and the advice to drink something strong before the procedure. The pain is immediate and astonishing. And infection? Likely. False teeth, by the way, are big business. Ivory, porcelain, and even real human teeth taken from the dead or the desperate are used to craft shiny new smiles. The poor might settle for wooden pegs or metal plates. The rich? They want pearly perfection, even if those pearls once belonged to a battlefield corpse. They call them Waterloo teeth. You step away from the washstand, mouth tingling from abrasion, lips dry from the cold. You feel slightly cleaner. Not minty, not refreshed, but socially acceptable. And in this world, that's the bar to clear. Outside, the street noise grows louder. A delivery cart clatters past. Someone hawks newspapers at the corner. You glance at your reflection, once more faded, tired, but presentable. Yours smiles, still intact, more or less. A small victory. You pick up your gloves and bonnet. Time to go. The world awaits, and you've got teeth to show. You pull on your stockings and boots, button your waistcoat, and reach for your hat, but not before checking your hair in the mirror or what's left of your hair. Because let's be honest, in Victorian London, a well-coiffed head is a constant. Battle against grease, soot, and the eternal plague of lice. Hair care here isn't about volume or shine. It's about survival. You lean closer to the fogged mirror and examine your scalp. It's been a while since you last washed your hair. Most people wash theirs once every few weeks, if that. Water is cold, soap is harsh, and drying your hair in a house with no central heating is an act of bravery or foolishness. Instead, you do what most do. You coat your hair with something oily and call it a day. Today it's bare grease. Or, if you're not feeling quite so extravagant, maybe beef tallow or lard. You dip 2 fingers into a small pot of the stuff. It's pale, thick, and smells faintly like a Sunday roast. You rub it between your palms until it melts, then carefully apply it to your scalp. It tames the flyaways, adds a dull sheen, and flattens everything into submission. Think of it as the Victorian equivalent of hair gel, greasy, fragrant, and mildly repellent to both lice and admirers. It's warm in the room now. Not from a fire, but from the exertion of layering grease onto your head while wrapped in layers of flannel and wool. You feel a bead of sweat crawl down your temple. You wipe it with your sleeve, which already smells like last week's mutton pie. Hairpins come next, lots of them, if you've got long hair. You twist, pin, tuck, and secure until your style is neat, restrained, and hopefully lice-resistant. If you're a man, you run a comb through your side part and smooth the strands back into a shape that screams, "I am respectable, even if I smell like coal." But oh, the lice. Those tiny freeloaders are everywhere. You try not to think about them, but your scalp itches just a little right behind your ear. Coincidence? Maybe. You scratch absently. Everyone has them, even the middle class. It's not a matter of cleanliness. It's just life. You try to keep them in check with the occasional vinegar, rinse, or a dash of turpentine. Don't ask, but they always return. Persistent little Victorian roommates. Historians still argue whether the upper classes truly avoided lice or if they just had better-smelling distractions. Powdered wigs, scented oils, and constant brushing helped. But in tenement houses, children passed them to one another like candy. Schools, boarding houses, even factories, all perfect breeding grounds. Some people keep a special fine-toothed knit comb in their dresser. It's made of ivory or bone, and dragging it through the hair is a ritual of desperation and resolve. If you catch a louse, you squish it with your thumbnail. There's no ceremony, just mild horror. Curiously, some Victorians believed that lice were actually good for your health, a sign that you were pure or somehow immune to certain fevers. You're not sure who started that rumor, probably someone itchy and in denial. Quirky. Practice of the day. Victorian barbers sometimes offered delousing services. Sit back, sip some gin, and let someone comb through your hair with a candle held close to the scalp, hoping to fry the little pests without setting your fringe ablaze. You decide to pass on that one. For scent, you reach for a bottle of bay rum or floral water, just a splash, enough to trick others into thinking you've bathed recently. For women, hair pomades often contain violet, rose, or sandalwood essences. Men prefer musk, bay leaf, or just something strong enough to mask the smell of the stables. Once in a while, if you're lucky or posh, you might go to a hairdresser. There, they'll steam your hair, brush it till your scalp protests, and finish with a brilliantine gloss. But those visits are rare and expensive. Today, it's just you, the grease pot, and a handful of pins. Your hat settles firmly over your work bonnet if you're a woman, a felt bowler or top hat if you're a man. Hats are essential, not just for fashion, but as a shield against falling soot, unexpected drizzle, and the judging stares of your fellow citizens. No one goes bareheaded unless they want to be mistaken for a vagrant or worse, a poet. You glance in the mirror once more. You look composed, not elegant, not fresh, but styled. And in this world, that's more than enough. You open the window for a breath of air and immediately regret it. A breeze carries the scent of rotting cabbage and chimney smoke into your room. You shut it again. Out in the hallway, someone is arguing over a lost hairbrush. You stay out of it. Brushes are treasured objects, especially ones with natural bristles. Some are passed down between siblings like heirlooms. Others are cleaned weekly with a special brush comb that removes the accumulated lint, grease, and if you're lucky, no uninvited guests. You pack your things for the day, including a small comb, a few spare pins, and maybe a sachet of dried lavender. Not for yourself, necessarily, but to waft under your nose when you board a crowded tram later. Before you leave, you peer into the small hand mirror again. You smile. Not bad, not good. But the hair is oiled, the hat is on straight, and you don't. Look like you've slept in a coal bin. That's the bar. That's Victory. And as you step out into the city once more through fog, smoke, and a street corner barber yelling about pomade specials, you scratch your head once. Just once, definitely. Not lice, probably. You've slicked back your hair, dabbed on some questionable perfume, and now it's time to get dressed properly dressed. Because in Victorian society, the way you appear is everything. Even if you haven't bathed in 2 weeks, as long as your shirt cuffs are crisp and your corset is tightly laced, you're practically a beacon of virtue. You start with your underlayers, and there are many. If you're a woman, that means a long chemise, usually white cotton or linen worn directly against the skin. Then come your drawers, split at the crotch for convenience. And yes, that detail becomes important later. Over that goes a corset. And not just any corset one that's been worn daily, sweated in, perhaps wept into, and rarely washed. After all, corsets aren't cheap, and laundering them is a delicate operation involving removal of the whalebone stays. Relacing and a very patient laundress, you lace it up tighter, tighter still. Your waist compresses by inches. You can't quite take a deep breath, but you look immaculate. A trim waist is a moral victory in this world. It says, I am disciplined, I am contained, I have conquered my flesh, even if under the layers Your ribs are rebelling, and your spine is filing a formal complaint. Over the corset, petticoats, usually several. Maybe more in winter, maybe fewer in summer. They add bulk, but also modesty. No one should be able to guess the shape of your legs. That would be scandalous. If you're a man, you start with a long shirt that also doubles as sleepwear. Then come your drawers buttoned awkwardly, and trousers. A waistcoat over that, a stiff-collared shirt, and a cravat that takes 5 minutes, and 2 curses to get right. You don't feel clean exactly, but you feel properly swaddled in expectation. Then come the outer garments, bodices, jackets, skirts, frock coats, waist cinchers, and whatever accessories fashion has deemed necessary this season. Gloves are essential. No one wants to shake a bare hand. That's practically an invitation to imagine armpits. Historians still argue whether Victorians were truly obsessed with modesty or whether it was all a grand performance. But when your clothes form a barrier between your body and the world, when even your elbows are concealed, modesty becomes less a virtue and more of a uniform. And here's the twist. These garments, they rarely get washed. That's not laziness. It's practicality. Washing wool, silk, and other delicate fabrics is labor-intensive, time-consuming, and expensive. Soap is harsh. Water is inconsistent. And laundresses, those tireless, underpaid women who bend over basins for hours, don't have the time or resources to wash entire outfits each week. Instead, you change your underlayers and air the rest out. Maybe beat them with a carpet rod. Maybe hang them in the sun. But soap and water? That's for emergencies. Quirky tidbit of the day. Some women stitched armpit pads into their dresses, small cloth inserts that absorbed sweat and could be removed and washed separately. It's a clever solution to a common problem. Others simply pinned sachets of herbs or lemon peels inside their bodices and hoped for the best. Men, meanwhile, often brushed their coats daily, removing ash, dandruff, and mystery smudges. A good brushing could revive a suit better than any wash. And if you owned only one jacket, you made it last. People judged you on how well you maintained your clothing, not how often you replaced it. You finish dressing and look at yourself in the mirror. Your clothes fit well enough. There's a slight sheen to your blouse from too many wears and not enough washing. Your boots are polished with a mix of beeswax and spit. And your gloves, though slightly threadbare at the fingertips, give the illusion of refinement. You don't smell clean, but you don't smell bad. You smell like camphor, rosewater, and yesterday's starch. That's practically a victory parade by Victorian standards. And here's where it gets interesting. Sweat itself isn't necessarily considered offensive. It's natural. What people fear is stench, odor, miasma. They believe foul smells can spread disease, weaken the lungs, even corrupt the soul. So your job isn't to stop sweating, it's to disguise it. To layer, spray, cover, and perform cleanliness, even if your skin hasn't seen soap in weeks. Corsets trap heat. Petticoats insulate. Frock coats suffocate. You walk outside already warm, and within minutes you're sweating. But it's a dignified sweat, a sweat that says, I am a functioning member of society. Please don't sniff too closely. You pass a group of laborers loading crates. They're in shirt sleeves, collars undone. Their scent hits you before. Their voices do. They haven't the luxury of layering for respectability. They work, they sweat, and they don't apologize for it. You, however, must apologize for everything. A lady must always appear composed. A gentleman must always carry a handkerchief. And heaven forbid someone catch a whiff of your armpit through 6 layers of linen and lace. But don't worry, Victorian fashion is full of delightful distractions. Brooches, cloaks, hats so large they cast their own weather. You can hide a multitude of sins beneath velvet and crinoline. Just don't lift your arms too high and try to sit near an open window. Outside, the street bustles. You hear the clatter of shoes, the swish of skirts, the hiss of horse-drawn carriages. And through it all, you stand tall, trussed up, buttoned in, an absolutely not washable dot. And still, you smile, because you look good. And in this century, looking good is nearly as important as being clean. You step outside, finally, into the damp, gray light of a Victorian morning. The air hits you like a wall, dense, smoky, and faintly sour, as though the entire city has been sweating under wool for too long. It clings to your layers and curls, into your nostrils, part soot, part stale meat pie. The fog might be natural, or it might be coal smoke. In Victorian London, it's hard to tell. Your thoughts drift to something nearly mythical, a hot bath. But unless you're rich or very, very lucky, a personal bathtub is more dream than reality. Most homes, especially in working-class neighborhoods, don't have any kind of bath at all. Plumbing, as we've discussed, is a suggestion. And bathrooms? A luxury reserved for the upper crust. So if you want to wash more than your face, you're going to have to earn it. Public baths, though they exist, they've been popping up more often since the 1840s. You pass one on your way toward the bakery, a squat brick building with a faded sign reading Public Bath and Wash House. It's early, but there's already a queue forming. Mostly men, mostly quiet. Some carry towels, others carry nothing. Everyone carries hope dot inside. For a penny or maybe 2, if you want warm water, you get access to a small cubicle, a tin tub, and a thin towel that smells faintly of mildew. You might get 5 minutes, 10 if you bribe the attendant. And the water, used, reheated, and questionably filtered. You try not to think too hard about who was in it before you. Still, this is a big deal. Getting clean, truly clean, is transformative. Your pores sigh with relief. Your skin remembers what it's like to not feel sticky. You emerge blinking and slightly pink, your hair clinging weightily to your temples. And for the rest of the day, you carry the glow of someone who's seen the inside of a tub. People notice. They don't say anything, but they sniff approvingly. Historians still argue whether most Victorians made regular use of these public baths or avoided them due to cost, modesty, or just sheer inconvenience. After all, walking a mile through muddy streets just to share tepid water with 6 strangers isn't everyone's idea of cleanliness. And even when people did bathe, it wasn't always a full soak. You've probably heard of the sponge bath, a quick rub-down with a damp cloth and a prayer. It's effective enough if done often, and easier to manage when the water has to be boiled over a fire and carried upstairs in buckets. But full immersion? That's rare, reserved for Sundays, illnesses, or special occasions. In many families, bath night means everyone shares the same tub of water, in order of seniority. Father goes first, then mother, then the children in descending order until the water resembles weak tea and smells faintly of cabbage and despair. Quirky tidbit of the day. Some wealthier Victorians kept portable tin baths in the dining room or kitchen, filling them once a week and using screens for privacy. It's not unusual to have a family dinner, then roll back the rug and prepare the bath, as though that's a perfectly logical sequence of events. You walk past one such house and see the telltale, steam curling out of a side window. Someone's lucky today, but let's say you can't afford the public baths or you simply don't have time. You might visit a barber's for a scalp wash. Yes, really. They'll pour warm water over your head, rub in a soap made from egg yolks or castile oil, and scrape your scalp with their fingernails until your eyes water. It's brutal, but effective. And afterward your hair smells faintly of lemon and pain. For women, it's even trickier. A full hair wash can take hours, especially with long locks. Wet hair is heavy. Drying takes forever. So instead you settle for brushing. Lots and lots of brushing. 100 strokes a night, they say, to keep it shiny. More like 300 if you're trying to remove soot and lice in one go dot. And when you do manage a bath at home on a rare evening when water is hot and children are quiet, it's an event. You light candles, set out your good soap, the one with flecks of lavender, and sink into that basin like a queen. For a few minutes you remember what it's like to feel human dot, then the water chills. The soap slips under the rim. Someone knocks on the door, and you realize you forgot to clean your feet dot, so you drain the tub, towel off with something that's more whole than fabric, and step back into the layers. The corset, the chemise, the petticoats, the damp hair under the bonnet. The glow fades, but for a little while you felt clean. There's an odd rhythm to this life, a kind of grim acceptance. You don't expect to be spotless. You aim for fresh enough. You track the days since your last wash like tally marks. You save your best soap for Sunday. You try not to sit too close to anyone on the tram. You pass another bathhouse, this one shuttered, likely closed for repair. Or maybe the furnace broke. Again, you pause, take a breath, and wrinkle your nose. A man walks by carrying a bucket of slop. It sloshes dangerously near your boots. You step back into the flow of traffic, dodging horses, hand carts, and a very determined dog. And you remind yourself, if you smell bad, so does everyone else. It's not personal. It's just Victorian. You're back on the street now, trying not to dwell too long on the tepid bath you didn't get this week. Instead, you shift focus to the Victorian version of a hygiene hack. Cover the smell, don't fix the source. It's not about washing off the funk, it's about outsmarting it. You reach into your pocket or reticule and pull out a little pouch. Inside, dried herbs, crushed flower petals, maybe a slice of orange peel if you've been feeling extravagant. This is your scent sachet. You press it discreetly against your bodice or tuck it into your sleeve. For a few brief moments, it's like walking through a meadow if you ignore the open sewer you just passed. This is the game now. Fragrance warfare. Victorian personal scenting is a curious art. With soap scarce, deodorant non-existent, and public transit very crowded, people rely on their noses and each other's tolerance to get through the day. Perfume becomes less of a luxury and more of a defensive measure. For women, it's lemon verbena, violet water, rose oil, or lavender. If you're daring, maybe patchouli. For men, bay rum, bergamot, or musk, sometimes applied directly to the cravat or mustache. You try not to overdo it, of course. A dab too much and you'll be accused of being fast or worse. French, some people get creative. They pin pomanders, little scented balls of herbs and spices, inside their corsets or waistcoats. Others sew hidden pockets into their skirts. For bunches of thyme, mint, or rosemary, Queen Elizabeth I allegedly stuffed lavender into her gloves. You figure if it's good enough for royalty, it's good enough for dodging the smell of fishmongers and tobacco stalls. Historians still argue whether these perfumed pouches were more about masking personal odors or warding off disease. Remember, the miasma theory still reigns supreme. People believe that bad smells cause illness. So wearing perfume isn't just about politeness, it's a survival tactic. And that vinegar bottle you used this morning? That wasn't just for your armpits. Vinegar of the Four Thieves, an old recipe said to repel plague, is still around in Victorian times. It's a pungent brew of vinegar steeped with herbs like sage, rosemary, wormwood, and camphor. You might dab it on your wrists or handkerchief, or wave it under your nose when a particularly foul odor wafts by. Speaking of handkerchief, you never leave home without one. It's your shield, your sword, your scented safety blanket. Ladies embroider them, gentlemen monogram them. Everyone uses them to cover their mouth while passing night soil carts, or when the Thames is having one of its extra fragrant days. A discreet sniff can save your appetite or your dignity. You pass a woman selling bundles of violets from a street cart. They're half wilted, but you buy one anyway and pin it to your collar. For a while, the scent lifts the corners of your day dot, but beneath the floral fog, everyone knows what's really happening. People stink. The body stinks. The street stinks. The city itself stinks. It's a symphony of human life and questionable plumbing. Still, that doesn't stop Victorian society from developing an entire etiquette around olfactory offenses. There's no deodorant, as we've said, but there is shaming. If someone smells particularly ripe on the tram or in church, you might hear a whisper. That person has low habits. A passive-aggressive sniff. A glance toward the armpit, a well-timed fanning of one's face. It's all code for please get thee to a wash-house, post-haste. But the truth is, even the well-off struggle. You know someone who wears the same silk dress to every party, refreshed only with a spritz of orange blossom water and a handful of pressed violets pinned to the hem. Another acquaintance swears by wiping her armpits with lemon slices and starching the inside of her sleeves, too. Absorb the evil. Whether it works, unclear. But it feels like an effort dot, and if you're truly desperate, you might visit an apothecary. They'll sell you rose cream for the body, camphor salve for your feet, and mouth waters to gargle. Some even promise miracle powders that sweeten the skin from within usually chalky mixtures of herbs and ground pearls. You try one once. It tastes like wallpaper paste and doesn't help at all. Quirky fad of the day. Scented buttons. Yes, really. You could purchase small buttons infused with perfume, meant to release aroma throughout the day as your body warmed them. Some people stitched these into their gloves or collars. They rarely lasted more than a week, But oh, what a fragrant week it was. You adjust your gloves, which have taken on a slight musty scent of their own. You discreetly pull a fresh handkerchief from your coat pocket and dab your forehead. The sun has come out weak and filtered through smoke, but it's warm enough to start sweating. That's the paradox of Victorian hygiene. Sweat isn't shameful. Smell is. So you layer up, grease your hair, powder your feet, and carry a bouquet in your purse. You endure, and you perfume your way through the stench dot, because if you smell like rose water, maybe people will overlook the fact that you haven't washed your chemise since last Tuesday. You pass a flower stall, pause, and buy a small bundle of dried lavender wrapped in newsprint. You tuck it into your sleeve. It scratches slightly, but you don't care. The scent is comforting. Someone brushes past you and mutters a sorry with a distinct note of herring on their breath. You try not to gag. You smile politely. And you make a mental note to refresh your sachet before dinner. This is the dance. A swirl of silk and sweat, violets and vinegar, judgment and jasmine, and you're doing just fine. You've made it through the perfumed gauntlet of the city streets, dodged a few suspicious puddles, and even managed to keep your lavender sachet from falling into the gutter. But now nature calls, and in Victorian London, that's never a simple matter. You glance around for a public toilet. There isn't one. At least, not in the way you're hoping. Public conveniences are still a novelty, mostly reserved for upper-class men and only just beginning to appear in select parts of the city. For everyone else, the options are, let's say, rustic. You head back toward home, where your personal facilities consist of a chamber pot, and if you're lucky, a backyard privy. The chamber pot, as you know, lives discreetly under your bed. A lidded bowl made of ceramic or tin, decorated if you're fancy, cracked and stained if you're not. It's there for nighttime emergencies, cold mornings, or moments when the idea of walking into the garden in the rain feels downright heroic. You used it last night, actually. You remember the splash, the awkward balancing act, and the prayer that no one walks in on you. It's still under the bed now, full, waiting. You make a mental note to deal with it later, then immediately suppress the thought. For now, you take the more dignified route and visit the privy out back. It's a small wooden shed, tilted slightly, with a crescent moon carved in the door, a design feature so iconic it's basically branding. The latch is rusty, and the smell hits you before you even open it. A thick, swampy stew of ammonia, mildew, and old paper. You hold your breath and step inside. There's a bench with a hole. Under the hole, a pit, sometimes lined with bricks, sometimes just earth. If it's been emptied recently, it's merely unpleasant. If it hasn't, well, let's just say the rats are bold, and the flies are worse. Some households try to keep the smell down with ashes, lime, or old newspapers tossed in after use. Others just hope gravity does the job. You do your business quickly, trying not to think about how many people in the house have used this same seat today, or yesterday, or all week. Historians still argue whether Victorian privies actually improved public sanitation or merely relocated the stench. Some were designed with ventilation shafts or removable buckets, early attempts at engineering cleanliness, but in poorer neighborhoods, a single privy might serve dozens of people. Overflow was common, and as the saying goes, when the pit fills, the street knows. You exit as fast as dignity allows and breathe deeply. Street air never tasted so sweet. But what happens to all that waste? That's where the night soil men come in. Yes, that was a real job title. These men worked after dark, hauling human waste from privies, cesspits, and chamber pots. They wore oilskins, high boots, and expressions of deep resignation. With large barrels, ladles, and shovels, they'd scoop the foul matter into carts and carry it to the outskirts of town, or more often, dump it into the Thames. Their work was dangerous, revolting, and poorly paid. But oddly, it was respected. They were essential, after all. Without them, the city would drown in its own filth. And in some cases, thanks to Victorian night soil economics, they could even sell the stuff as fertilizer. Pure was the polite term. Farmers loved it. Gardeners less so. Still, not everyone had the luxury of a regular waste collection. In densely packed slums, chamber pots were emptied out windows with a cry of warning or not. This gave rise to the infamous phrase, gardy-loo, a corruption of regard as low, or watch out for the water. Except it wasn't water. Quirky local tradition. In some neighborhoods, you could tell the wealth of a family by the height of their chamber pot shelf. The higher the shelf, the cleaner the house. Why? Because chamber pots on the ground floor tended to spill when carts rumbled by. You keep yours under the bed high enough to be safe, low enough to reach in the dark. If you lived in a fancier part of town, things were marginally better. Some houses had water closets, an early form of flush toilet. These weren't common, but they were a marvel when they worked. You pull a chain, water rushes from a cistern above, and down it all goes, unless the pipe's frozen, or clogged, or your landlord hasn't paid the plumber since last winter. And even if you do have a water closet, chances are it's outside or off in a drafty corner of the house. Victorian plumbing is experimental at best. Pipes freeze. Sewers back up. Sometimes flushing a toilet means summoning a geyser from the kitchen sink. It's all part of the charm. The irony is, Victorian society was obsessed with decency and modesty, especially around bodily functions, but had the most indecent, immodest solutions for managing them. You're expected to never mention your needs, yet navigate them with grace, tact, and a tolerance for things that squish underfoot. You return inside, relieved, vaguely unsettled, and determined not to drink too much tea before bed tonight. The chamber pot looms in the corner of your eye like a porcelain goblin, and tomorrow morning it will be your turn to empty it. But for now, you press your handkerchief to your nose, light a little clove-scented candle, and open a window just wide enough to let the stink out, but not enough for the neighbor's chamber pot splash to come in. Because that, dear listener, is Victorian hygiene in its most intimate form. You're walking along the embankment now, the sun dipping behind a thick veil of smoke. The water glistens in the late afternoon light, but don't be fooled. This is not a place you want to breathe too deeply. That shimmering river beside you, that's the Thames. And in the summer of 1858, it's not just a river, it's a hazard. The stench hits you like a carriage, wheel to the chest. Warm weather has turned the river into a simmering broth of human waste, industrial runoff, rotting animal carcasses, and something that might once have been a boot or a ham. It's impossible to tell. What you do know is that your eyes are watering, and the air tastes like boiled sock. This is the Great Stink. Yes, it's an actual historical event, and you're lucky enough or unlucky enough to be here for it. You lift your handkerchief to your face. Others have done the same, even the ladies with parasols and the gents with monocles. Everyone looks vaguely horrified, like the entire city has collectively stepped in something, and they have .c. By 1858, the Thames has officially become the city's largest open sewer. All the chamber pots, all the privies, all the night soil carts, they've been dumping their contents here for years, centuries even. It was bad before, sure, but now the hot weather has made it unbearable. You walk past Parliament itself, normally, a symbol of British control and order, but even they can't ignore the smell anymore. During a particularly ripe session, lawmakers drape the curtains in sheets soaked with lime chloride and vinegar. They consider relocating entirely. Imagine running a government while actively gagging. Historians still argue whether it was the stench alone that forced reform or the fear of another cholera outbreak. 3 major cholera epidemics had already devastated the city, and many still blamed bad air for spreading the disease. The Thames, ripe and steaming, seemed like a literal death cloud. And speaking of death clouds, Londoners actually start calling the river the dead soup. Fish float belly up near the surface. Dogs bark at the water but won't drink it. Horses shy away from its banks. People who live near the river start sleeping with their heads wrapped in vinegar-soaked cloths. You consider doing the same. You pass a boy selling lemonade from a cart parked disturbingly close to the water. You shake your head. Not today. The oddest part? The solution was sitting there all along, quietly proposed, mostly ignored until the smell became too powerful to ignore. Enter Joseph Bazalgette. Quirky hero of the day, Bazalgette was a civil engineer with an obsession for order, symmetry, and not drowning in effluent. He had a vision to build a massive underground sewer system that would carry waste away from the Thames, not into it. Radical stuff. After years of paperwork, debates, and budget hesitations, the Great Stink made everything suddenly very, very urgent. You look down now at what will one day be part of Bazalgette's grand achievement: miles of brick-lined tunnels beneath your feet, carefully angled to use gravity to move waste out to treatment facilities beyond the city. It's all still under construction at this point, but already there are whispers that it might change everything. Still, for now, you're standing beside a river that's actively fermenting. You can see greasy patches on the surface. Someone tosses in a bundle of something unidentifiable. It bobs for a moment, then disappears. You don't ask. A street preacher is ranting about sign and sulfur from a soapbox nearby. His voice cracks as he describes the plague of stink as divine punishment for moral decay. People mostly nod. They've stopped arguing that this is normal. It's not. You step further from the bank, trying to find a spot where the breeze doesn't carry the full bouquet. There isn't one dot in response to the crisis. People start inventing strange devices. Aromatic respirators, long tubes stuffed with herbs that you wear over your mouth. Portable scent diffusers, worn like brooches. One doctor even suggests stuffing wax plugs into your nostrils soaked in eucalyptus. You try it once. You smell like a pine drawer for hours. But no matter how many sachets, oils, or sprays you use, the smell gets through. It seeps into your clothes, your gloves, your memory. It lingers. And yet Londoners go on living. They eat, they shop, they ride their carriages, and do their banking while the river cooks beside them. There's a strange stubbornness to it all, a refusal to stop functioning, no matter how revolting things get. It's the most British thing you've ever seen. You pass a newspaper stand and glance at the headlines. The Thames an affront to decency. Sinking in our own filth. Is God angry? With Lambeth? Sensational, yes, but accurate. Later, when you return home and try to eat your dinner, salted beef and mashed peas, you find that the smell has followed you. It's in your hair, on your coat. Even your bread tastes faintly of it. You light a candle, open a window, and dunk your handkerchief in vinegar, just like the members of Parliament. You hold it to your nose and breathe. This is your reality. The great stink. It will pass eventually. Bazalgette sewers will change the city forever. The Thames will recover. Cholera will fade. The idea of modern sanitation will take hold. But right now, in this moment, you are living in a city that is quite literally drowning in itself, and yet somehow you've still got errands to run. You're back inside now, seated near the fire with a cup of tepid tea in hand, but your thoughts are elsewhere, specifically in the direction of a topic that no one in Victorian England dares discuss above a whisper: menstruation. That's right. You're a woman in the 19th century, and your body, once a month, betrays you in the most inconvenient, socially invisible way possible. There are no tampons, no pads, no period trackers, no middle. There is, instead, a combination of quiet, dread, stiff upper lip endurance, and a drawer full of cloth rags euphemistically referred to as monthly linens. The first time it happened, you weren't told what to expect. Most girls weren't. One morning you woke to stained sheets and the horror that you were dying. Your mother, when she finally explained, whispered the word in your ear as if naming, "A demon." "Your courses have begun," she said, then handed you a bundle of fabric and an awkward hug. That was the beginning of your lifelong relationship with pins, stains, and secrecy. You keep your clothes in a small linen pouch, tucked away from view. They're washed by hand, discreetly, late at night or very early in the morning. God forbid someone sees them hanging to dry. Even now, you feel a flutter of anxiety just thinking about it. And when you're out and about, you rely on tight corsets, layered petticoats, and sheer willpower to keep everything in place. Sometimes you fold a square of soft flannel and pin it to a belt worn under your chemise. It's uncomfortable. It shifts when you walk. But what choice do you have? Historians still argue whether most women used some kind of early sanitary belt, or simply relied on folded cloth and instinct. Commercial sanitary products wouldn't appear until the very late 1800s, and even then, they were sold in whisper-voiced euphemism and advertised with vague references to women's needs. No one wanted to admit that half the population bled monthly. It was too uncivilized. You sip your tea and stare into the fire. The cramps have started dull and low like a warning bell. There's nothing for it. You'll have to go about your day. Rest isn't expected, nor is it granted. Victorian women are supposed to be delicate, yes, but never inconvenient. You recall reading one of the countless advice manuals written by men who have never once bled. They speak confidently of hysteria, wandering wounds, and the dangers of emotional overstimulation during a woman's monthly trial. Some recommend bed rest, others cold baths. A few suggest bleeding more to balance the humors. You're not sure if that's irony or incompetence. Quirky tidbit of the day. One doctor in 1860 claimed women shouldn't read novels while menstruating because it overstimulates the nerves and confuses the womb. You laughed so hard you nearly leaked through your skirts. In wealthier homes, a woman might retreat during her time. Take to her rooms. Recline on a chaise with a hot water bottle, if she has one, reading religious poetry and nibbling dry toast. You, however, have work to do. You rise, adjusting your layers, and walk carefully. You're hyper-aware of every movement, of every twinge. You cross the room and bend to pick up the fire poker and freeze. Was that a stain? You glance behind you, heart pounding. Nothing visible. Not yet. You slip into the washroom and check quickly. A small spot, not terrible. You clean up as best you can with cold water and a bit of soap. No one must know. You scrub, rinse, and wring the cloth with the efficiency of someone who's done this too many times. You carry it to the fire and drape it over the hearth behind the screen. Just enough warmth to dry it quickly, just enough cover to keep it unseen. This is the quiet choreography of Victorian womanhood, an endless ballet of concealment. You return to your chair, sit down carefully, and pull your shawl tight around your shoulders. The pain has crept up your spine now. You think about the remedies your aunt swore by: chamomile tea, lying on cold tile floors, even holding a penny between your knees for posture. None of them help, but pretending they do is part of the ritual. No one talks about it. Not really. You have female friends, of course. You exchange knowing glances, cryptic comments like, "It's my time," or "I'm unwell," or "I have a headache." Everyone understands, and no one elaborates. Even the most modern of your peers avoid using any direct terms. You once overheard a male physician describe menstruation as a monthly purging of nervous energy. You wondered aloud what he thought a nosebleed was. He did not appreciate the joke. There are moments when you envy the freedom of men, the ease with which they move unburdened by layers, lace, or the fear of bleeding through a petticoat. But then you remember that men aren't offered much room for frailty either. No rest, no softness. Just a different kind of mask. Outside, a vendor calls out something about hot roasted chestnuts. The scent wafts through the window, and for a moment the cramps ease. You take another sip of tea, now lukewarm, and shift in your seat. Tomorrow, the worst of it will pass. In a few days, the cloths will be washed, dried, folded, and hidden away. Your face will regain its usual color. Your appetite will return, and the creeping sense of dread will recede until next month. But for now, you sit quietly. You are a Victorian woman, and this is part of your silent, invisible routine. No one will ask how you're feeling, and you wouldn't answer if they did. You wake the next morning to a dull throb in your jaw. It starts deep beneath the molars like something ancient and angry, and radiates up into your cheekbone. You groan and press your hand to the side of your face. Welcome to Victorian dentistry, or, more accurately, the absence of it. There is no ibuprofen, no dentist on speed dial, no cozy chair with overhead lighting and soft jazz playing in the background. What you do have is a mouth full of decay and a choice between whiskey, prayer, or pliers. You shuffle toward the mirror and try to examine the damage. The tooth is dark, almost black at the edge. Your gums are swollen. There's a sharp twinge. When you touch it, you recoil and mutter a curse you're not supposed to know, but you do know it because you live in a time when sugar is becoming more common, oral hygiene is primitive, and dental care is only marginally better than medieval. Torture. If a tooth hurts, odds are it's doomed. You pop a clove into your mouth. It numbs the pain a little, thanks to its natural antiseptic oil, and you chew it slowly. This is the closest thing you have to an anesthetic. That or strong gin, or laudanum, if you're desperate, and don't mind sleeping through the next 2 days and possibly your own birthday. For most Victorians, a trip to the dentist isn't routine. It's a last resort. Dental professionals are rare, expensive, and terrifying. Barbers still perform extractions, and in smaller towns the job might fall to a blacksmith. Yes, really. If someone's got strong hands and access to tongs, they qualify. You wrap a scarf around your jaw and step outside, dreading the idea that today might be the day you have to do something about it. Down the street, a tooth drawer's shop catches your eye. The sign is modest. Mr. F. Jolly, teeth extracted painlessly, which is, of course, a lie. There is nothing painless about having someone wedge a pair of metal pincers into your inflamed gum and yank. But you consider it anyway. Historians still argue whether tooth extraction was more common among the poor or simply more brutal. Wealthy families often had the means to preserve teeth longer, or at least replace them more convincingly. Poor folks got theirs pulled at the first sign of rot. You pass by Mr. Jolly's door and keep walking. Maybe not today, Dot. Instead, you pull from your pocket a small tin of tooth powder, your old friend. You dab a bit on your fingertip and rub it along the aching gum. It doesn't help much, but the ritual is comforting. Then you think of something far worse. False teeth. Victorians were obsessed with dental prosthetics. A full set of gleaming ivory teeth was a mark of status, often displayed in portraiture like a prize. Never mind that they didn't always fit, or that they had to be glued in with beeswax or sticky gum resin. A white smile was a white lie, and everyone agreed to pretend. Some dentures were made of porcelain, which chipped easily and clicked like crockery when you spoke. Others were carved from ivory or animal bone. But the most prized, if morbid, were Waterloo teeth. Real human teeth taken from the mouths of fallen soldiers after battles, especially from the Battle of Waterloo. Imagine that your smile powered by the fallen. You wince as the pain pulses again. A dull, stabbing reminder that even the most charming Victorian grin often hid a world of discomfort. Quirky fad of the day. Some fashionable ladies carried tiny silver toothpicks on chains or attached to chatelaines. They used them after meals, sometimes in public, with a flick of the wrist and a wink. Dental hygiene is flirtation. You, on the other hand, resort to chewing parsley when you can find it. It's supposed to freshen the breath, so do cardamom seeds, licorice, or, in desperate cases, charcoal pellets. You try not to smile too widely at dinner, especially if meat is on the menu. What about fillings, you wonder? They exist. In theory, but they're rudimentary, made of gold, lead, or even tin foil. And the procedure is done without anesthesia, of course. Just clamp your jaw, dig out the decay, and hope you don't scream loud enough to scandalize the neighbors. You've heard of someone who swears by brushing with urine. Yes, urine, an old Roman practice, still hanging on in rural parts. It's supposed to whiten the enamel. You filed that away under never going to happen. The worst part, truly, is the helplessness. A bad tooth affects everything: your mood, your appetite, even your sleep. But there's little to be done unless you're willing to lose the tooth entirely. And in the long run, many people just do. By middle age, it's common to see people with partial dentures, gaps, or entire sets missing. The phrase, keep your teeth, is both literal and aspirational. You think again of Mr. Jolly, of the chair, the pliers, the bowl on the floor, and the stiff drink offered before the procedure. Not yet, you tell yourself. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe next week. You return home and boil some water for tea. Not too hot. Not with this tooth. You sit by the fire, your jaw wrapped, your breath sweetened slightly by clove and mint. And you wait. You wait for the pain to pass, or for courage to arrive, or for the tooth to finally give up and fall out on its own. This, too, is part of Victorian hygiene, enduring quietly. Even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. You're standing in front of the hospital now, and even before you step inside, you sense it's something grim, something sharp in the air. It's not just the scent of ether or iodine, because those are barely used yet. No, this is the unmistakable perfume of sweat, fear, and iron. Welcome to the world of Victorian medicine, specifically its idea of cleanliness. You take a tentative step into the entry hall. The floor is wood, stained and warped. The air is heavy. Somewhere someone groans. The walls are dotted with soot smudges and handprints, and the nurse at the desk looks overworked and underpaid. You are instantly aware that you do not want to end up in a bed here, but you've come for a reason. Curiosity, perhaps. Or a visit to someone who wasn't quite lucky enough to escape. The surgeon saw. That's right, surgery. In the 1800s, it's more public spectacle than precise science. The operating theater isn't a metaphor. It's literally a theater. Tiered seating, a central stage, a bucket nearby for, well, you know, the surgeon is already scrubbing in. Except, wait, no, he's not, because scrubbing in isn't a thing yet. He wipes his hands on his apron. An apron already stiff with dried blood from yesterday or perhaps last week. He picks up a saw. Yes, a literal bone saw. No gloves, no mask. Just confidence and an impressive mustache. You watch from the gallery as a man is brought in. He's semi-conscious, drunk, or perhaps sedated with a bit of opium or chloroform. An assistant holds him down. Another one fetches bandages unsterilized, of course, and then the sawing begins. Historians still argue whether Victorian surgeons were fully aware of how unsanitary their tools and spaces were, or if they simply accepted post-operative infection as inevitable. Mortality rates for surgeries were staggeringly high, not because of the operations themselves, but because of the aftermath: sepsis, gangrene, and hospital fever. Back then, a successful operation meant the patient survived the procedure. What? Happened later was up to Providence. You hear the saw against bone, the crack, the dull, wet snap. You grip the railing. The doctor moves quickly, not for speed's sake, but for survival. The faster he works, the more likely the patient is to make it through without bleeding out or dying of shock. There's applause when it's done. Applause, like a play. You leave the theater, stunned, ears ringing, stomach churning. Outside the operating room, you pass the ward. It's one long, drafty hall crammed with beds. Sheets are stained. Air is stale. Windows are cracked open if only to let out the smell. Patients lie wrapped in blankets, their skin pallid, their eyes dull. You try not to meet their gaze. There's no concept of isolation. Contagious diseases mingle freely with surgical recoveries and chronic ailments. One cough spreads across the room like a cold breeze. You hold your breath and move on. A nurse in a crisp cap passes by with a tray of instruments. They glint dully: forceps, scalpels, bone tweezers. Not one of them sterilized. At most, they've been wiped on a cloth. Some surgeons believe cleanliness is dangerous, that antiseptics weaken the body's natural defenses. You can't decide whether that's bold or bonkers. And yet, progress is creeping in. You hear someone mention Joseph Lister, a forward thinker, who's starting to promote the use of carbolic acid to clean wounds and sterilize tools. It's controversial, radical. Some call it unnecessary. Others say it smells too awful to be worth it. But the numbers are compelling. Fewer infections, more survivors. Some doctors begin to follow his lead, washing hands before surgery, sterilizing scalpels, even wearing aprons that are white. A shocking development. Quirky tidbit of the day. Many surgeons prided themselves on the bloodiness of their coats. A spotless apron meant you weren't doing enough operations. The more crusted your gear, the more experienced you were considered. You shudder and move toward the dispensary. Shelves upon shelves of jars and vials. Mercury, arsenic, laudanum, quinine, morphine, camphor. If it can numb, purge, or make you forget the pain, it's here. Dosing is inconsistent, and many patients walk a fine line between medicated and poisoned. You pause near the tonics shelf. Bottles claim to cure everything from dropsy to melancholy. Most contain a delightful blend of alcohol, opiates, and maybe a dash of lavender for flavor. You consider taking one home for your toothache. You overhear a young doctor bragging about removing a tumor the size of a baby's head without any antiseptic. He's grinning. You wonder if the patient survived. You step outside into the cold again, blinking against the brightness. The sky is overcast, the air damp. The hospital behind you stands stoic, brimming with the sick and the well-meaning. You're grateful to still be on this side of its doors. You think of your friend down the street, the one with the infected foot. He's afraid to go in. You can't blame him. The hospital is a place where you go to get better or to not come out again. But change is coming. Slowly. New ideas. New practices. A few brave doctors washing their hands, boiling their instruments, challenging tradition. Modern medicine is being born, one sterilized scalpel at a time. But for now, you're thankful for your warm coat, your unbroken skin, and the fact that your errands can be completed without losing a limb. And if you get sick, well, maybe a mustard plaster and some quiet prayer will do the trick. You've had enough of the city for now, the choking fog, the ever-lurking chamber pot, and the thunderous cough of London omnibuses. So you've escaped out into the countryside where the air is theoretically fresher and the hygiene, well, let's say it's different, not necessarily better. You're staying in a modest cottage, tucked between hedgerows and grazing fields. There's a thatched roof, a crackling hearth, and a dampness that seeps into your bones like a polite but persistent house guest. You expected country life to smell like wildflowers and clean hay. Instead, it's a medley of damp wool, unwashed socks, cows, and the faint ghost of something boiled too long. You rise with the sun or the rooster, rather, and notice quickly that water here is drawn from a well, not a tap, not a pipe, a literal stone well with a bucket, a crank, and a frog sitting at the edge looking like it owns the place. Washing your face becomes a task that requires shoes, sleeves rolled up, and enough strength to hold 5 liters of water from the earth. It's good upper body work. You tell yourself that as your shoulders protest, you bring the water inside, pour it into a basin, and test the temperature. It's cold, mountain spring cold, teeth-chattering cold. You splash it on your cheeks anyway, flinch, and curse in the general direction of all Victorian plumbing, or lack thereof. Bathing here is more ceremonial than regular. There's a tin tub stored in the pantry. On Saturdays, if it's warm enough, if there's time, and if the water's been heated over the fire, it gets dragged out into the kitchen and filled, one pot at a time. The children go first, then the women, then the men, or vice versa. It depends on the house. You're told that your bath is scheduled for 2 days from now. You nod, as though this is fine. Between baths, people rely on a time-honored practice, dry washing. This involves a cloth, a dash of vinegar or spirits, a bit of powdered starch or even ashes from the fireplace, and a sturdy tolerance for not feeling truly clean. You rub the cloth across your face, underarms, and neck, and hope for the best. Quirky tidbit of the day. In some rural areas, people swear by coal dust as a skin treatment. It draws out the bad humors, they say, rubbing it onto their arms like some Victorian charcoal mask. You pass on the offer when a friendly farm wife gestures toward the scuttle. The clothes are no cleaner than the people. Laundry day in the country is a once-a-week affair, if that. Linens are boiled in lye soap and pounded on stones near a stream. The results are stiff, scratchy, and vaguely gray, but at least they smell of wind and effort. You hang your drawers on a hedgerow, pin them with wooden pegs, and pray the cows don't investigate. You notice, though, that despite the lack of frequent washing, the rural folk don't seem bothered. There's a kind of earthiness here, a comfort in not chasing impossible standards of polish. You realize that no one smells like flowers, but no one smells bad either. Just real. Historians still argue whether country dwellers were healthier than their city counterparts. On the one hand, there's fresh air, fewer crowds, and less coal smoke. On the other, cold, damp homes, unventilated rooms, and the occasional family cow sharing indoor space. You learn quickly that water is precious. It must be fetched, carried, and sometimes filtered through a cloth to remove stray insects, or, on unlucky days, a bit of frog spawn. So you learn to stretch it, a basin for 3 face washes, a single kettle to make tea and wash a plate. Waste not. Want not to brush your teeth, you're given a twig. It's from a particular tree. Someone calls it chew wood. You fray one end, chew it thoughtfully, and scrub. It tastes like bark and effort, but your teeth feel marginally cleaner afterward. And your hair? You brush it by the fire, letting the heat dry any lingering moisture. The brush is old, missing bristles, and shared among the household, but it's functional. Once a week, someone heats up a kettle, mixes in a bit of vinegar or beer, and helps you rinse your scalp. You towel off with something that used to be a tablecloth and feel faintly accomplished. There's something oddly soothing about the slowness of it all. Each act of cleaning is deliberate. Nothing is rushed. You heat water, you wait, you cool it, you pour it, you reuse it. No faucets, no pressure, just patience. You sit by the hearth with your feet on a rag rug, sipping warm milk, and realize this is as fresh as you're going to get. The smoke from the fire curls into your clothes. The dog sleeps at your feet. There's dust in the corners and a faint mildew smell from the pantry, and yet somehow it's enough. You think about the city, its perfumes, powders, and desperate layering. Out here, no one wears violets to disguise their sweat. They wear aprons and get on with it. You catch your reflection in the small, tarnished mirror over the fireplace. Your hair is tied back, your skin is flushed from the fire, and there's coal smudge on your cheek. You look tired, but grounded, human. You smile. And if your teeth are still a bit gritty from that chew stick, so be it. Tomorrow you'll fetch water again, boil your underthings, and maybe even hopefully step into that tin bath. But for now, you wrap yourself in a scratchy shawl that smells of lanolin and wood smoke, and watch the steam rise from your teacup. Cleanliness out here is not about perfection. It's about doing what you can, when you can, with a little soap, a lot of heat, and the patience to wait your turn. The morning begins with the sound of coughing. Not from you this time, but from the children outside, 3 little ones chasing a hoop across the muddy lane, bundled in clothes that are clearly hand-me-downs from 2 siblings ago. Their noses run, their boots squelch, and their cheeks are smeared with soot, jam, or possibly both. You sip your tea and watch them from the cottage window, quietly marveling that anyone so small can be so filthy before breakfast. Because today, we're talking about children in the Victorian era and what hygiene means when you're young, covered in coal dust, and likely to fall headfirst into something sticky before noon. Let's start with the basics. Kids rarely bathe, not because parents don't care, but because water is scarce, time is short, and children are by definition mud magnets. Most get a full bath once a week, if that. More often, it's a quick wipe down with a damp cloth, some vinegar on a rag, and a stern reminder to at least wash behind your ears. Of course, how clean a child is depends entirely on where that child lives. In the countryside, dirt is inevitable. Children run barefoot, play in streams, chase animals, and come home covered in nature's version of grime. Soap is used sparingly, often homemade and eye-wateringly strong. Hair is brushed, sometimes. Fingernails? If you're lucky. In the city, it's a different kind of dirty. Soot from chimneys settles on every surface. Industrial neighborhoods smell like smoke and chemical runoff. And for the poorest kids, a day might begin and end in the same threadbare shirt, stiff with dried sweat and yesterday's porridge. Historians still argue whether Victorian children were more robust because of their exposure to germs, or simply less likely to survive long enough for hygiene to make a difference. Infant mortality was high. Diseases spread quickly, and yet, somehow, childhood carried on. Take the chimney sweeps, for instance. Many were boys, some as young as 6, sent up narrow flues to brush out soot. The work was dangerous, the pay pitiful, and the hygiene non-existent. They'd emerge covered in black from head to toe, coughing up ash, their hands blistered. Bathing afterward was optional and rarely enforced, and yet some families believed a bit of cold dust was healthy. They thought it toughened the skin, kept out the damp, shielded you from bad airs. You see one such boy now walking barefoot past your gate, a rag tied around his foot where a shoe used to be. He waves. You wave back. Quirky tidbit of the day. Certain schools actually included hygiene lessons, though lesson is a generous word. Teachers would tell children to wash their hands before meals, brush their hair, and use a comb regularly. Soap might be handed out once a month. Some schools even kept tubs for group bathing sessions, though these often ended with the water grayer than it started. If you're lucky enough to live in a well-off household, a nursemaid or governess might supervise your hygiene. She'll help you bathe, braid your hair, and change your underthings with clockwork regularity. But if you're a child of the working class, you learn to manage your own hygiene or don't. You pass a public pump where a girl is filling a bucket. She looks to be about 8 years old, balancing the weight awkwardly as she trudges back toward a row of brick tenements. Her fingernails are black. Her hair is a bird's nest of knots. And still she hums to herself. Children are resilient. Sometimes alarmingly so. Inside the cottage, you hear the neighbor's child throwing a tantrum. There's shouting, then splashing, then the unmistakable sound of a slipper slapping tile. Someone's bath day has come due, and they are not thrilled about it. You recall your own childhood stories of cold basins, scratchy towels, soap that stung your eyes, and being told not to splash lest you waste water. Baths weren't playtime. They were a chore, and skipping them was a small act of rebellion. And then there are the superstitions. Some parents believe that bathing too often could make children sick, that opening their pores would let in illness. Others thought warm baths would spoil a child's spirit, make them soft. So kids were kept clean enough to avoid comment, but dirty enough to be strong. You glance at your own hands rough from the country air, streaked with soot from the fire. And yet, here you are, still standing. The idea of childhood innocence in the Victorian era often came wrapped in lace and ribbons, but real childhood? It was noisy, messy, smelly, and full of skinned knees. Hygiene was a background character, always there, occasionally noticed, rarely prioritized. In wealthier circles, etiquette manuals encouraged parents to teach their children habits of neatness. There were nursery books on cleanliness, rhymes about brushing your teeth, and reward charts for keeping your hands clean. But for many children, life moved too fast and too hard for such luxuries. You remember one story you overheard in town, a boy who refused to wash his face for a month, claiming the dirt kept him warm. He swore it worked. You believe him. As the sun dips lower, the children outside begin to scatter. The girl with the bucket disappears into her doorway. The chimney boy whistles something tuneless as he heads down the lane. and the three kids with the hoop vanish in a blur of laughter. And Mud. Tomorrow they'll be just as dirty, maybe dirtier, and still they'll run, they'll play, they'll live. Because in Victorian England, childhood hygiene isn't about sparkle or scent. It's about survival with just enough soap to keep the lice guessing. You've returned to the city now, your boots once again dusted with soot, and your nostrils reacquainted with the familiar tang of coal smoke, fish brine, and something unnamably Victorian. As you step back into the narrow cobbled streets, you're struck by a peculiar thought. Hygiene here isn't just about being clean. It's about being seen. It starts with class. Your neighbor, Mrs. Wilkes, scrubs her doorstep every morning, not because the soot doesn't settle back down within hours, but because it shows she tries. The brass doorknob is polished daily. The lace curtains, yellowed though they may be, are starched and neatly hung. From the outside, she looks clean, and that's what counts. Because in this world, hygiene is a kind of performance. You could have lice, rotting teeth, and questionable underthings, but if your gloves are white and your collar is stiff, you're respectable. The poor, no matter how much they scrub, often carry the stain of judgment. They smell poor. They look poor. Therefore, society decides they must be morally lacking too. It's a cruel system, and deeply entrenched, even within the working class. There's a hierarchy of cleanliness. The laundress who boils linens all day is praised for her strong Protestant work ethic. The fishwife who works knee-deep in water, considered coarse. The seamstress with chapped hands and neat hair, admirable. The coal seller's daughter with black fingernails, pitied or avoided. You pass a young man selling brushes, clothes brushes, hairbrushes, shoe brushes. He rattles off his pitch with pride. A tidy man's a trusted man. He says his own boots are cracked, his coat threadbare, but he shines his buttons to a gleam. He's trying. You nod respectfully. Historians still argue whether Victorian hygiene was driven more by medical science or social pressure. Germ theory is emerging, yes, but moral cleanliness is older, deeper. It's tied to religion, reputation, and the British obsession with order. To be clean is to be good, or at least to look good. You stop by a dress shop and peer in. Mannequins wear crisp cotton shifts, lemon-scented sachets tucked between their arms. The shop girl behind the counter wears a spotless apron, despite the heat. She dabbed her face. With rose water this morning, you can tell you did too. Everyone plays the game, but it's not always easy to keep up. Laundry, for instance, is a nightmare. Water must be heated by hand. Clothes are scrubbed on boards, boiled in cauldrons, wrung through rollers, then pinned to lines or laid over hedgerows. Soap is harsh, labor is long, and knuckles are often raw by the end. Yet if you show up to church in a dress that smells faintly sour, eyes will flick toward you with quiet disapproval. Quirky class trick. Some women of means started wearing washable linen cuffs and collars over their dresses' detachable cleanliness. You change those bits daily, and suddenly you're sparkling, even if the rest of your gown hasn't seen water since Easter. You return home to find a neighbor tossing lavender into the hearth. It smells pleasant for a moment, masking the cabbage. And Ash? She sees you and offers a polite smile. Her child is playing with a rag doll near the stoop. His hands are grubby. His cheeks are clean, You both understand he'll be washed before dinner. Not because he's dirty, but because someone might knock at the door. This is the balance Victorian people learn to maintain. Clean enough to pass, not so clean as to seem vain. Smelling sweet, but not too sweet. Well kept, but modest. You consider your own habits. The carefully folded handkerchief, the lavender pouch in your coat, the way you check your shoes for mud before entering a shop. None of it makes you truly clean, not by modern standards, but it places you on the right side of perception. A gentleman with yellowed cuffs and polished boots is forgiven. A woman with worn gloves but a crisp bonnet earns a pass. The illusion matters. It buys you space, grace, opportunity. And of course, all of this becomes doubly important when you're ill, because illness, too, is class-coded. A pale, quiet invalid in a lace nightcap is delicate. A coughing match girl with a rash is unclean. The symptoms may be the same. The response? Worlds apart. In the end. Victorian hygiene is a paradox. You live in a city where human waste flows in the river, where rats nest behind bakery doors, where the soap sometimes smells worse than the problem it's supposed to fix. And yet you judge others and yourself by the shine of a shoe or the scent of a collar. You are never fully clean. Not by any stretch, but you are clean enough. And that in this society means everything. You close your door, hang your cloak, and remove your gloves. You light a candle with a scent of orange peel and cloves. The day is done. And somehow, despite the muck and the miasma, despite the coal and the cloth rags, despite the vinegar and the violets, you feel almost fresh. Sweet dreams.